She woke early. Oh, it was a beautiful spring morning. She loved mornings like this. She went through their little garden, where the roses were in bud, and the bluebells already out, and climbed up the steep rocks of the Acropolis, up to get some water to wash in. She put in the pail, brought out the water and washed, and it felt good. But all of a sudden, there was a stirring in the bush behind. She looked behind, and there, coming towards her, his eyes full of love and lust, was the bee-herd. She started and ran blind, ran fast, not looking where she was going. She ran over the rocks, and out of light and life. He, her beloved, her minstrel, mourned her for 12 long days and nights, as the custom was, and as he eventually scattered her ashes, he thought to himself, why should I carry on? Why? And as he thought so, he took out his long bronze dagger. But, as he drew it, his eye glanced, the sun catching the strings of his holy lyre, the strings upon which he had been taught to play by the god himself, tunes that the god himself had said would defy death. And the minstrel thought, well, maybe they do. Maybe the god had wisdom. And he went to the god's great oracle down in Delphi, and he had scarcely come in when the god, speaking for the priest, said, Why are you here? Why are you not taking those tunes I taught you, the tunes to defy death, and taking them down to death's own kingdom, and using them and their power to bring back your beloved? Why are you not doing this to our great glory? Why are you here? And the minstrel replied, But I do not know the way. Do not know the way? Go south to the rocks hard by. There you will find a cave surrounded by the myrtle tree. And as the sun rises on the spring equinox, it will send a beam of light down into the cave. Follow it down and down until you come to Death's kingdom, and there play all the while. And if you would have my advice, do not trust my cousin Persephone. Do not trust Lady Kor, as she is now called, Queen of the Dead. Now go to our great glory. And off the minstrel went to the cave hard by, surrounded by the myrtle bushes, and waited until the equinox. And the light of the sun as it rose did indeed send a single beam down through the cave, down through a crack, and the minstrel followed it, down through endless chasms that took him beyond light, beyond time, beyond the memory of man, until at last, it seemed to him, they opened up into some great chasm, and it was full of shadows, muttering, black and blue. And they rose up to meet him, and he remembered what the god had told him about the tune, and he started to play the tunes the god had told him, and the shadows subsided, and the single beam of sunlight he was following became all the brighter. It led him then straight through Death's kingdom, full of shadow fields and old ruined walls, until he came to a mighty river, and yet it showed a path over that river by stepping stones, and he crossed over the stones and came to a wall, and in the wall there was a gate, and in the gate was a creature, such a creature as he wished he had never seen. A 3-headed dog it was, and one head spat fire, and one poison, and the other growled as it prepared to spring. But before he could spring, the light shone full in his face, and it fell back dazed, and his tunes grew louder yet. And hearing that, the dog slumped asleep, and he gingerly stepped over it, went through some great courtyard until he came to a portico, and in the portico there was a silver bell, and as he watched, the beam of light struck the bell, and it started to move, and to boom sadly across the land. And in answer, he heard footsteps, the footsteps of a titan or a giant or a goddess. And she was suddenly before him, a dark shadow, the Lady Kor herself. And she said, Why have you come here, minstrel? And he said, I have come to win my beloved. And Kor advanced on him and said, "Why should we let you have her? For she is now one of my ladies in waiting. Why?" But the bell sounded louder yet, and suddenly Kor stopped and looked, strangely to say, sad and beautiful. And she said, And yet on this day of all days, the day I must leave my beloved husband, my children, my palace, all those I hold dear, and go back into the upper world to serve my mother, that she may create summer, on this day, when I must leave all I love, your grief touches mine. And I am minded to heed your prayer, but on one condition." "Name it," he said. "Well then, think, Orpheus. Can you trust the Lady of Death? For I will bring your Eurydice back up in my train, but you will have to take us in trust, and go ahead, and not look behind, whatever happens. If you can do this, your Eurydice is yours, but if you cannot, she is mine." And Orpheus said, "I will do what you say. But how will I find the way?" And the Lady of Death said, "Follow the smell of myrtle. Now turn." And Orpheus turned, and all of a sudden the courtyard was full of the smell of myrtle. But mingled in that smell, oh beautiful, was the smell of rose and olive, the smell of Eurydice. And Orpheus went forward, and he noticed that if he turned his head off the true path, the smell of myrtle faded, and so guided by that, he went through the courtyard and came to the rock wall, and there was Cerberus, advancing, spitting fire, spitting poison, getting ready to spring. But the smell of myrtle grew stronger, so strong it became overpowering, and the dog slumped to the ground. And the minstrel crossed the river Styx, and as he leapt onto the other side, there was a great howling sound, and he remembered what the Lady Persephone had said, that he would have to hear Cerberus howl 3 times, and on the 3rd time Eurydice would be his. And so he thought to himself, that's the first. And he went then through Death's kingdom, through the Shadowlands, and came to where the rock wall came down once more, and the caverns started. And as he went through, there was another howl, but this time there was a note of sadness in the howl, of deep, echoing sadness, as of a hound who had lost his mistress. That's the second, he thought, and he went through the chasms. And you know, it was strange. As he went through the chasms, the smell of myrtle grew fainter, and the smell of roses and olives grew stronger. And as it grew stronger, he thought to himself, oh, I want my Eurydice. And desire grew and grew as the light grew about him. And all of a sudden, he was back in the cave he had started from. And he could bear it no longer. He was full of desire and full of triumph. For I have triumphed over death, he thought. I have triumphed over the Lady of Death. It must be time. I must steal a glance. I must see my moment of triumph. And his eyes shot back, hardly moving his head at all. And there before him, frozen for an instant, he saw the great shadow of the Lady of Kor. And standing by her, his Eurydice. Frozen in a moment of memory, a flicker in time, with such an expression on her face, her eyes full of love, but her mouth set in another expression. And in after days he could never decide what it was, whether it was fear, or laughter, or sudden joy. But she was gone, and all that was left in the cave was the smell of myrtle before him, and nothing else. And the cave echoed with the third barking of Cerberus. But this time it was full of joy, the joy of a dog whose mistress or playmate has suddenly returned to it. And Orpheus went out, and it was said he dwelt with men, and in those days, and from that time, Eurydice has lived in this alone, in the beauty of the songs that Orpheus played.